Welcome to my channel, USA Battle Zone. Today's story will take you deep into the heart of a U.S. Marine Corps base, to a place where respect, honor, and sacrifice mean more than any medal ever could. This is the story of a young Marine who thought he was just sharing a joke, until one old man's quiet answer changed the entire tent, and left every soldier in stunned silence. So grab your coffee, sit back, and listen closely, because this one will stay with you long after the video ends. Scene transition. Fade to the hot, dusty air of Afghanistan. It was August, the kind of heat that sticks to your skin, the kind of sun that bleaches the desert into gold and dust. Inside a large GP tent at Forward Operating Base Harrison, the Marines were trying to escape the heat. A dozen of them sat around folding tables, sweating through their camis, laughing, drinking bad instant coffee. Some were cleaning weapons, others were half asleep. That's when the flap of the tent opened, and in walked someone unexpected. He wasn't in uniform, not anymore. He was old, maybe in his late 70s. His back was straight, his face weathered, his eyes hidden behind a pair of faded aviator sunglasses. He wore a simple khaki jacket, no medals, no patches, just a small pin on the lapel. A cane tapped against the dirt floor as he stepped in. Every head in the tent turned. Sir, can we help you?" one young Marine asked. The old man nodded slightly. "Just here to see the corpsmen. They said I could sit down for a bit. Legs aren't what they used to be." The Marines nodded. It wasn't unusual for veterans to visit. But something about this man, his quiet composure, the stillness in his movements, made the room shift. He sat down slowly at the corner table, resting his cane beside him, folding his hands neatly in front of him. For a few moments, silence filled the air. Then, like always, the jokes started again. Sound of laughter, metal mugs clinking. Private First Class Miller, 20 years old, fresh out of Camp Pendleton, always the loud one, grinned at the old man. "So, sir," he said, trying to sound casual, "you a vet?" The old man nodded once. "Yes, a long time ago." "What branch?" Miller pressed, still smiling. "Marines," the old man said simply. That got a few respectful nods. "Marines, huh," Miller said, puffing his chest. "Well, welcome home, sir. You know, we still keep the place running for you old-timers." The tent laughed softly. The old man smiled faintly, not insulted, but not amused either. "Glad to hear it," he said. Then Miller leaned forward, grinning wider. "So, what was your rank back then, old-timer? Staff sergeant, gunnery sergeant, or were you one of those lifers who never made it past corporal?" A few Marines chuckled, thinking it was harmless. But as soon as those words left his mouth, the tent seemed to grow still. The old man looked up slowly, lowering his sunglasses. For the first time, they saw his eyes, sharp, blue, unwavering. Eyes that had seen something far beyond these walls. He spoke quietly. "Son, I was a sergeant major. United States Marine Corps. 1st Marine Division, July, 1968. The air changed. Someone coughed softly. A few men straightened in their seats. But the old man wasn't done. He leaned forward, his voice low but steady. "I had 57 Marines under my command when we crossed that river. When we came back, I had 8. The tent went silent. Even Miller froze. The old man looked around the room, at the young faces, the nervous smiles fading. Every man in that tent, he continued, thought he was invincible. Thought he'd joke his way through the war. And maybe they would have, if war was fair. He paused, took a deep breath. "But war," he said softly, "doesn't care how strong you are. It doesn't care how loud you laugh. It just takes, and it keeps taking, until you learn what respect really means." The wind outside rattled the canvas walls. Flashback imagery fades in. War sounds, faint echoes of artillery, young Marines shouting orders. The narrator continues softly, describing the memory the old man sees in his mind. He remembered the smell of burning brush, the screams, the cries for corpsmen that never came fast enough. He remembered crawling through the mud, dragging his men by their flak jackets, hearing mortars whistle overhead. He remembered Private Keegan, just 19, who used to hum country songs while loading his rifle. He remembered Corporal Ruiz, who gave up his seat on the evac bird to carry a wounded man back to the line. He remembered every face, every name. When he finally looked up from the memories, he was back in the tent, surrounded by Marines who suddenly looked very young. The old man gave a faint, sad smile. "You boys remind me of them," he said quietly. "That same fire, that same brotherhood. Don't ever lose it, but don't ever forget where it came from." Camera slowly pans to the young Marine, Miller, who's now silent. Miller swallowed hard. He stood up from his chair, face red. "Sir," he said, voice trembling slightly, I didn't mean." But the old man held up a hand. "I know, son, you didn't mean anything. None of us ever do, until life teaches us what meaning really costs." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, tarnished coin, a challenge coin, edges worn smooth. He slid it across the table toward Miller. "Keep it," he said softly. "It belonged to one of my men. He never made it home. Maybe it'll remind you that every stripe, every medal, every joke, it all comes with a price someone already paid." Miller looked down at the coin. It was engraved with a single word, valor. He didn't say a word. He just nodded, eyes misting. Scene change. The old man stands slowly, using his cane. "Thank you for letting an old Marine sit with you," he said quietly. He started toward the tent flap. As he reached it, a voice called out, not Miller's this time, but Sergeant Lewis, the senior Marine in the room. "Sergeant Major." The old man stopped, turned slightly. Lewis stood at attention, his voice steady. "Permission to speak, sir." "Granted." Lewis took a deep breath. "On behalf of every Marine in this tent, thank you. For everything." The old man's eyes softened. He nodded once, a slow, deliberate motion. Then, as he turned to leave, every Marine in that tent stood up, chairs scraping against the dirt, and snapped to attention. The sound was crisp, unified, like the beating heart of the Corps itself. The old man paused at the exit, his back to them, and said quietly, "You don't salute the man. You salute what he stands for. Remember that." And then he stepped out into the blinding light, the flap closing behind him. Cinematic music swells, soft, emotional piano chords. Inside, no one spoke for a long time. Miller still held the coin in his hand, staring at it as if it weighed 100 pounds. He finally whispered, "Sergeant Major, what unit did he say?" "1st Marine Division," someone replied. Lewis frowned slightly. "July, 1968, that was the Battle of Hughes City, wasn't it?" "Yeah," another Marine said quietly. "That's where they lost almost the whole unit." A chill went through the room. No one laughed again that day. Scene fades to later that night. The desert sky stretched above them, black and infinite, scattered with stars. Miller sat outside the tent, still holding the coin. He turned it over and over in his hand, reading the word valor each time. He thought about the old man's eyes, the kind of eyes that have seen too much and still somehow found peace. He thought about the jokes, the arrogance, the way he'd tossed the word, old-timer, around without a second thought. And for the first time since he'd joined the Marines, he felt something deeper than pride. He felt humility. He whispered softly to himself, "Thank you, Sergeant Major." Then he placed the coin carefully inside his breast pocket, right next to his heart. Scene fades out, text overlay on black screen. Scroll, respect is not demanded. It's earned, and sometimes, it's remembered in silence. Narrator returns, gentle tone. Years later, when that same Marine, now a staff sergeant, was stationed at Camp Lejeune, a new private walked into his tent. The kid was cocky, loud, full of the same fire Miller once had. And when he saw an older vet visiting the camp one afternoon, that young private joked, "Hey, old man, what rank were you back in the day?" Miller smiled softly. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the same tarnished coin, and set it on the table between them. "Sit down, son," he said quietly. "Let me tell you a story." Cinematic music builds, slow strings and brass. The camera pans across photos, black and white images of Marines in Vietnam, mud and sweat and courage on their faces. Then, newer photos, Marines in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, standing under the same flag, wearing the same pride. Different wars, same brotherhood, Same respect. Narrator emotion thick in voice. The Marine Corps isn't built on strength alone. It's built on memory, on the men and women who carried that torch before you, who bled, who fought, who never came home. It's built on lessons passed down, not through textbooks, but through stories, stories like this one. So the next time you meet an old veteran with faded patches and quiet eyes, don't just see the years. See the history, see the courage, see the reason you wear that uniform today. Because one day, if you're lucky, some young Marine will look at you and say the same words you once said. And maybe, just maybe, you'll have a story of your own to tell. Music fades to silence. The sound of a bugle plays, taps, softly in the background. Studio microphone narrator quietly. This story is for every Marine, past, present, and future. For every soul who carried the weight of duty with honor. And for the Sergeant Major, whose words still echo in the hearts of those who listened. Final screen. The American flag waves slowly in the wind. Studio microphone narrator, firm but emotional. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of what sacrifice truly means, then please, like, comment, and subscribe to USA Battle Zone. Because here, we don't just tell war stories, we remember the warriors. Until next time, Semper Fi, United States.